Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I am one of your two hosts today, John DeLynn, and I am joined by the amazing
Carah Burrell.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey, Carah, what's going on?
Hey, John. John just asked me at 7 o'clock this morning if we wanted to do a kind of like improv live, talk about the news, talk about what's going on. So the Boy Scouts of America and the LDS Church are in the news. So this is a really, really important topic to talk about: systemic abuse and the implications of the LDS Church and the Boy Scouts of America interweave together. So, John, what else do you want to talk about?
Yeah, today is September 16th, 2021, and it's been so amazing to have your support on Mormon Stories, to be able to bring Carah on and to be able to try new programming options. A couple weeks ago, Carah and I did a response video to the wonderful Jacob Hess, and from there we got a lot of good feedback saying, hey, let's do more of this type of content.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the series that we want to start bringing to you on Mormon Stories podcast, in addition to long form faith crisis interviews, in addition to the Gift of the Mormon faith crisis content that we're now putting out, in addition to the amazing John Larson content that we have that you guys are supporting, we want to cover current events.
Are your heads spinning already by like so much content?
Way too much content
flying at you through your screen. We got it all.
If you guys want less content, put that in the comments right now and we'll work on that. But the feedback we have is that you guys like this kind of stuff. So what we hope to do is every week or two, whenever there's a big news item come out, we want to cover it. We may cover it in this kind of, two on all of you kind of format. We also maybe want to start bringing in special guests into our studio and do a live panel with people like Samantha and Tanner or John Larson or Natasha or other Margie or other cool people as well.
Mark Oslin.
Yeah. Rachel.
Yeah.
So
roping them all in here.
So look for really cool innovations, but today it's me and Carah. I think we do a good job.
We'll find out soon enough. You'll let us know.
Yeah. So today we are covering kind of this breaking news about the Mormon Church admitting that it has a major role in systemic sexual abuse of Boy Scouts for decades and decades. They've committed to $250 million in a settlement. We're going to get into that today. But before we do, I have a really cool announcement. Are you ready for an announcement?
Yeah, I didn't know you had an announcement.
I do have an announcement. So I am announcing right now in Mormon Stories that Thrive Day 2021 is happening.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew that part, but okay.
Yeah. So
sure, in November.
Yeah. So okay. November 14th, this year, just like we did a couple years ago, where we had Amber Scora and Wayne Sermon and a bunch of amazing people at the Salt Palace, we are announcing today Thrive Day 2021 at the Salt Palace on November 14th is happening. And we have some amazing speakers lined up. And I'm just going to show you a bit about who those speakers are.
Oh, because I don't know who the speakers are. This is exciting.
Yeah. So the first speaker that we're announcing is Sarah Edmondson. So if any of you are familiar with The Vow on HBO, which is a documentary about NXIVM and the cult, the NXIVM, or if you haven't seen The Vow or other podcast episodes about NXIVM, you may have heard about this new podcast that's out called A Little Bit Culty with Sarah Edmondson and her husband, Nippy. But today, this very morning, I was able to talk to Sarah on the phone, Sarah Edmondson, and Sarah and Nippy confirmed that they're going to come to Salt Lake City and speak at Thrive 2021.
Woo!
How cool is that?
That is so cool.
Yeah. So
front row and center, I will be.
So we are super excited to have Sarah and Nippy come. And then also I was able to confirm today Lance Allred. Have you ever heard of Lance Allred?
I've only watched his entire Mormon Stories interview and edited it for TikTok.
All right. Yeah. So for those
He's
of you,
cool dude.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Lance Allred is a former NBA star, or at least NBA player. He played with LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers. He played professional basketball for well over 10 years. Those of you who follow Mormon Stories will have listened to my episode with him. He has a book called something like The New Alpha, where he talks about
the new alpha male, redefining masculinity.
Yeah. And he's legally deaf. He's the first legally deaf NBA player.
From a polygamous Mormon family.
Yes, all that.
What a Wikipedia article that guy could write about.
Absolutely.
When you think you've heard it all, you got it everything.
Yeah, from
Lance
the
is
Allred
a fascinating
group.
character.
So Lance has agreed to speak at Thrive Day 2021. He also is the speaker who gave us the amazing TED Talk with over 4.6 million views at this point, called "What Is Your Polygamy?" So here's what you do. We don't just want to fly these amazing guests into Salt Lake City and then have no one show up. And most importantly, we want to have an amazing day where thousands of you can come to Salt Lake City, make new friends, forge community, and just have this amazing get together. We had 1,700 people attend Thrive Day 2 years ago. And we want to have at least 2,000 people at this Thrive Day. So if you want to join us, what you need to do is go to thrivebeyondreligion.com right now, click on events, and under the event calendar, you will see the event for November 14th. And you can just click on that Thrive Day 2021 event for November and register. And tickets are only $25. I do want to always kind of make sure people understand that this is a nonprofit event. We have underwriters that are putting forth literally tens of thousands of dollars to reserve the Salt Palace. No one's making any money. We are paying our speakers out of respect for their profession. Oh, and by the way, Carah, I have an announcement for you. We want to have a TikTok comedy hour, and we are asking you to lead up a TikTok comedy hour where you plan sort of like you pick the coolest, most popular TikTokers who are willing to come, and you guys plan like an hour of fun for the entire
I had these. No, just kidding.
Audience. So
I was checking the sound. I thank you for the offer. Yes.
Will you lead that up?
Yes. I just read the text from Clint like 2 minutes ago, and I didn't have time to respond. So the answer is yes.
All right. So we'll even have Nuance Ho there and your favorite TikTokers. We also want to, like last time we had booths where people like Jeremy Runnels and Christian Moore, anyone that is anyone, we want to invite them to Thrive, have a booth, sell their books or just meet and greet. So we're going to try and get XMOLEX down. All the famous YouTubers and TikTokers, we're going to find a way for you to meet your favorite YouTubers or TikTokers or podcasters. I'm going to invite Bill Reel, RFM, see if they'll come down. I don't know if they will. Haven't asked him yet. But we want Thrive Day every year to be the place to meet your favorite authors, podcasters, TikTokers, YouTubers, etc. Have I sold you?
Yeah.
Will you be there?
Yeah. I mean, you need to get through this news thing because now I have to get to work because I just barely found out about this task that I will be in charge of collecting these TikTokers to come. So hopefully it's like a one call, that's all type situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So please register now. We're excited to have you. We're excited to have Sarah and Nippy and Lance and other speakers to come. There are a few more really amazing speakers we've invited, and we're just waiting for confirmation on that. But Natasha Helfer will be there. I'll be there. You'll be there. It's going to be a blast.
It's a party.
All right. So thanks. Please spread the word. And now for the main story. So there are lots of different ways to introduce this topic, but I first read about this from breaking news by the Associated Press. And so for those of you who haven't heard yet, the announcement that came out of the Associated Press by Randall Chase yesterday is that Boy Scouts settlements reached with major insurer and Mormons. And there's so much to get to, but I think what might be interesting is to kind of just give our listeners kind of an overview and kind of a background, because there's a lot to this. So let's dive in. I did a brief kind of review on when the relationship between the Mormon Church and the Boy Scouts started. And there's actually a timeline that you can find on none other than the Deseret News's website, which is
Nice of them.
Yeah. It's a timeline. It was published in 2018, and it's a timeline, a look at the relationship between the LDS Church and Scouting. And what we found is that the relationship between the Mormon Church and the Boy Scouts started as early as 1875. And over time, that relationship grew. You would see Mormon prophets, often in their Boy Scout uniforms. At some point, the Boy Scouts of America program was folded into the Young Men's program. In some ways, it almost became the Young Men's program. Of course, women, for some reason, we didn't incorporate the Girl Scouts into. Any idea on why
I
that might
was
be?
one of those girls growing up that was really resentful that we didn't get to do all the cool stuff that the Boy Scouts did if you were like a tomboy like me. And as we will get into, I am actually kind of grateful in retrospect. Hindsight is 2020. That maybe I am not so regretful that I didn't get a chance to be in the Boy Scouts. But I wish I could have done cool merit badge things and outdoor camping. And there's a lot of, fun adventure stuff that as a young woman you miss out on.
Yeah, and I get the sense that when the Mormon Church kind of partnered with the Boy Scouts, it's sort of during these, kind of this 20th century era where we're leaving polygamy behind. We are trying to become like as American as apple pie. And what's more American than Boy Scouts? But also traditional gender roles. We support, like you said, men should be camping and hiking and fishing and mountain climbing and preparing for war, because Mormons have always been good soldiers.
Would this be a good time to introduce that when I was in Achievement Days, when I was 11 years old, and we made have you ever made those they're called marshmallow guns out of PVC pipes, and everyone was coloring theirs with daisies and cute paints. I covered my hands in red paint and put bloody hand marks all over my gun. So that's a good introduction into like how my brain worked as a child. Like I really wanted to be doing Boy Scout like war things, even as a 10-year-old girl in Achievement Days. So I was not into the gender roles then, and my husband's home taking care of our son now. So still a theme of my life.
Yeah. So while I was going to Boy Scout camp, doing merit badges on like canoeing and hiking and fishing and camping and astrology and astronomy, Mormon girls were doing what?
We were making marshmallow guns and learning to sew and making like recipe kits and writing letters to our future husbands. I'm sad. I can think of 20 more examples.
Quilting, right? Quilting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just reflects
trying on wedding dresses and just anything that's like, you're made to be a wife one day. Let's see what we can do starting at 8 years old. Then set up the activities thusly.
Yeah. And it just really fit well with traditional patriarchal, rigid Mormon gender roles. And that was the Mormons in the 20th century. And there was no stopping it. And if you actually go, I think this is interesting and worth showing. If you actually go to if you Google Thomas S. Monson and Boy Scouts, you'll see this whole highlights of the relationship between Thomas S. Monson and Scouting. And he receives the Silver Beaver Award in 1971. And it shows him with pictures of him as a Boy Scout. And, all through the years, he's receiving all these awards and attending national jamborees. And, what also probably isn't understood is that behind the scenes, the Mormon Church becomes 20% of the national membership of not just the Boy Scouts of America, but of its leadership.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. It's not just what happened to Mormon boys in terms of scouting. I think a big part of the story we're going to talk about is that we become sort of the main backbone behind the Boy Scouts of America.
For sure.
And so we're not just talking about Mormon Boy Scouts who get abused. We're talking about Mormons being the leaders of the Boy Scouts of America, or at least some of the main leaders.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
That those things are incredibly intertwined.
Yeah. So which goes to why the Mormon Church would pay such a big settlement. So anyway, Mormon prophets, seers, and revelators for literally over a century were really promoting the Boy Scouts in incorporating it into the Young Men's program. There's Thomas S. Monson receiving the Scouts Canada's Silver Fox Award. And if you just Google like Thomas S. Monson and Boy Scouts, you're going to see a million photos. I'm a little bit surprised the Mormon Church hasn't scrubbed all photos of Thomas S. Monson's association with the Boy Scouts.
Oh, you think they would?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they might. Maybe they might a little bit. What do you think?
Oh, I think that they have higher priorities. But do you think that that's something they would do?
I don't know.
Let it be known.
It's possible. So that's kind of the history. But then what you see happening in the 2000s is the Mormon Church starting to express some concern about its relationship with the Boy Scouts of America. And so that, do you remember any of those rumblings?
That was at 2018?
Well, I mean, that's where it starts to culminate. But even before then, do you ever remember like the relationship with the Mormon Church and Boy Scouts ever being kind of like starting to be called into question?
Yeah. And for clarification, I was never, and I know I look like a den mother right now since I did my hair like this today. Sorry, I'm not about to go with a bunch of like 10-year-old boys hiking in the Uintas right now. I'm actually recording a podcast, so don't let these braids fool you. But my only history with the Boy Scouts is when I did PR for the LDS Church, and was one of my responsibilities to call every single troop in LA and invite them to our jamboree. So I'm implicit in all of this. Oh no, what have I done? But anyway, what was your question again?
Yeah. So do you remember when the rumblings
and then
started?
I remember, then I remember right around, I feel like it was 2018. That's what I'm going to call it. This is not a very good news show, but
it's going to get better.
It's going to get better when I stop talking now. But I do remember that a lot of it had to do with girls trying to join the Boy Scouts, or like trans boys, trans girls, and the lines around gender being a little more fuzzy, and the Boy Scouts and the LDS Church kind of needing to break off their relationship, and it not really being super clear why.
Yeah.
But I think it had to do with gender issues is how I remember it.
Yeah. So like you'd hear about, can a Boy Scout be gay, but does that violate the Boy Scout honor?
Oh yeah, because you could not be an out.
Could you be, you heard rumblings about that?
Yeah.
Rumblings about that.
That is incredibly that you couldn't be an active, like an out, like gay man and be a Boy Scout leader.
Well, it was those two things. So some of the rumblings have been that I've heard over the years are, can you be an openly gay Boy Scout? Can you be an openly gay Boy Scout leader? And then there were the trans issues that you would hear rumblings about. Can you be a transgender Boy Scout? And then you'd also hear like, can a girl join the Boy Scouts? And of course, they always let Mormon moms be den leaders of Cub Scouts,
right?
But never of Boy Scouts. So it's okay for the women to do the Cub Scout stuff, but not the Boy Scout stuff. Anyway, you would, I would say in the 10 or 20 years leading up to the dissolution of the relationship between the Mormon Church and the Boy Scouts, you would hear these types of rumblings, and you would sort of wonder, wow, is the Mormon Church going to be severing its relationship with the Boy Scouts? Is that even something that could be possible?
Yeah, it seemed like they were too intertwined at the time.
Yeah.
Like hundreds of millions of dollars supporting the like already established program of the Boy Scouts that the church would then have to scramble and replace pretty quickly.
Yeah, and this is something we'll get to at the end, but like if you think about the fact that literally the Mormon Church incorporated Boy Scouts into its young men's program formally, this is where prophets are involved. It's these people that we look to as Mormons, as prophets, seers, and revelators that talk directly to God and Jesus, and they know the future, because why else would we want a prophet or need a prophet if they can't see the future? So
I didn't really have a grandpa growing up, so
you didn't.
I didn't really have an old man to look up to, so I can think of other reasons. But go on.
Yeah. So I can just say this, that when Thomas S. Monson was prophet, it felt like the relationship between the Boy Scouts and the Mormon Church was never stronger. And if you had asked me, is there any chance the Mormon Church would ever sever its relationship with the Boy Scouts, I would say no chance in Outer Darkness. Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Too much intertwined.
Too intertwined. So that takes us to 2000, and that takes us to, let's just say 2018, which is the date you kind of already mentioned.
May 19th.
May
9th.
Yeah. So we've got the New York Times article with Lori Goodstein, who's been a friend of mine over the years. She's a New York Times reporter, and Christine Hauser. And the article is Mormon Church ends century-old partnership with Boy Scouts of America. So it's over a century, and all of a sudden this bomb drops May of 2018 that the relationship is ending. And, that was, do you remember that announcement?
Yeah.
Do you remember what you thought? Do you have any impressions?
Yeah. I just remember at that time thinking, how the heck is the church going to create its own program quickly enough to replace like not just like the history, but like just the robust nature of the program that the Boy Scouts were, that it was quite the outsourced program that the church doesn't often do, that they would then have to produce themselves. So it's such a strong arm of the church, like an appendage of the church that is hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of funding goes to. Like, what are they going to do now? They're going to have to scrap something together.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember just wanting to know what justifications were given. And I think that's one of the topics we're going to hit later, is kind of just how honest and open is the Mormon Church. Because if you go back and read this New York Times article, which we will link to in the show notes, you'll have some of the quotes from the church PR people. And Eric Hawkins, who is kind of one of the church's main PR guys, he writes in this New York Times article, in terms of the reasons given for the discontinuation, it says in the New York Times article, Eric Hawkins, director of media relations for the church, said that the change under discussion for more than a decade will allow the church to institute a youth program that is rooted in church teaching and translatable across countries and cultures. It will also reduce the disparities that have existed in the program for boys and girls, though it will continue to keep them separate, he said. The intent is that the resources, time, commitment, opportunities, activities, and budgets will be the same for boys and girls.
If the director of media relations for the church is saying that, let's pack it up. What he says is God's word. Let's be done. There's nothing else to say. Eric Hawkins said it. That's the reason.
So, Carah, what if you had to interpret what the flowery reasoning and beneficent, magnanimous justifications for the discontinuation of the Boy Scouts, what should we learn from what Eric Hawkins wanted us to believe at the time?
Well, he had the point that I actually do agree with, though, is about it does feel a little bit too American, like apple pie. It does not cross over countries and cultures, so I can see that, but I know that there is definitely some bodies in the basement.
So if you were, but if you were like Eric Hawkins's PR rep, and you were to summarize for Gen Zers that don't like PR talk what I just read to you, and you were to say, hey, Gen Z Mormons, this is awesome that the church is ending its relationship with the Boy Scouts. Here's why. What would you say?
I would say, hey, you know what? Now that we think about it, Boy Scouts, that's a little bit too gendered. That's a little bit too traditional. What we're actually going to do is our own thing, because, hey, we're led by God. We don't need to outsource this program to the Boy Scouts anymore. We're going to do our own thing. And it's going to be so fair. We're going to have equal funding. Everyone's going to love it. Between boys and girls. And across, of course, we have a global church, so we're going to have more of a global program.
Exactly.
So we are on the up and up. It worked for a while, but we need to update.
Continuing revelation, right?
Right on.
Yeah.
So we thank you, God, for a prophet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Eric Hawkins wants us to believe in 2018 that the reason why the Mormon Church is discontinuing its relationship with the Boy Scouts is because they love girls. They want gender equality between boys and girls, though separate but equal, right? Because he does say it will still remain separate, right? So that we love girls now. They're the same as boys.
Though. You know what's funny about that? Is where they're like activities and budgets. You know what's not really expensive is like marshmallow guns and like trying on dresses from DI. You know what is expensive? Going on like weekend campouts and like
high adventure
and all of those
canoeing trips and mountain climbing events. Like that's what we used to get to do, right?
Yeah. So they're gonna like really break the bank when they take us to DI to pick out wedding dresses. Like, thanks so much. Just like that. That's what always kind of hurt was the budgets. Felt very disproportional.
Right. So he's basically trying to address kind of some of the concerns that came out of the ordained women movement with people like Nyland McBain and other. Why is there budget disparity? But my point is the justification that they wanted Mormons in the world to believe is we love girls. We want fairness. We want boys and girls to be separate but equal now in terms of budget and activities. And we love our international members. And so we really need, since, bummer, Boy Scouts is just in the United States. Now we need to start thinking about all our global membership. And so we need to discontinue our relationship with the Boy Scouts because we now love all our members across the world. Are we summarizing Eric Hawkins's justification adequately?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Hire us.
Well, now, yes, hire us, Eric Hawkins. I actually think he should, but that's another podcast. So now it's in 2021, right? Now we're a few years later. And is it fair to say that now we're learning the real reason why the Mormon Church discontinued its relationship with the Boy Scouts of America?
I think so.
I think so. And so now, if you actually read the article, whether it's the Washington Post, Boy Scouts reach agreement with Mormon Church and its insurers in sex abuse case. That's what we just read Eric Hawkins's justifications. Did he happen to mention the massive sexual abuse pending lawsuit? Did he mention that?
Yeah. We need a little bit of space in between 2018 and 2021 when this other shoe is going to drop, I guess.
Yeah, he kind of didn't mention that. And if we go to the Associated Press, Boy Scouts settlements reached with major insurers and Mormons. Even the Deseret News kind of surprised me and has a pretty decent article. And the Deseret News article says Church of Jesus Christ, the new name, will pay $250 million into fund for Boy Scout sexual abuse claims. And I guess that's kind of what I wanted to hit up at the top is I'm going to venture to say that these settlements have been in the works for years.
Right.
These mounting sexual abuse claims by Mormon Boy Scout males and, past and current have been mounting up over the past several decades. They've gotten lawyered up, and the lawsuits and the class action lawsuits have gotten so substantive and so significant that the church realized a few years ago this was on the horizon and they needed to sever ties ahead of time before the settlements would actually come out.
Yeah, what a conspiracy.
Am I cynical?
No.
Am I a little cynical?
Yeah, I think as we're going to get into, organizations like this are just like rife, setting people up for failure without having a proper place to be able to vet people well. And that's kind of what the church is already known for. So you do it at the scale that the Boy Scouts acts at, it's going to be a massive crisis. It's going to have a ton of victims on the other end of it.
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and regardless of which of these three articles you read, and we'll put links to all of them in the show notes, the summary is kind of stunning. All the different media outlets are agreeing that, number one, that the LDS Church made up 20% of the 2.3 million members of the Boy Scouts. Do you know what percent of the United States is actually Mormon?
Oh, I don't.
I mean, it's less than 1%.
Yeah.
So we're looking at less than 1% of, U.S. citizenry, over 20% of the, I would say, leadership and participants in the Boy Scouts were Mormon. That's a big number.
We have so many temples.
Wait, what was your point there?
Like, it's less than 1%, but we keep building so many temples.
That's true.
We have so many temples.
That's
obviously,
true.
they're
temples are good.
Obviously, we're probably 20%. I don't need to look in the actual statistics. I'll go by the temple size and scale of building. Anyway, go on.
So 2.3 million Boy Scouts at its peak, 20% of them were Mormon. A second data point that we read from these articles is this is at least the fifth settlement. So we're talking like we're already filling up one hand for the number of class action lawsuit settlements that have been in the works or are in the works right now.
Right.
But one of the stunning numbers that I found is that these new media outlets are reporting over 80,000 victims at least.
That is outrageous.
That's just the people that report. We know that in general, less than 1% of victims ever report their abuse. So it has to be well over 100,000 victims. And if 20% of those are Mormon, we're talking about at least 20,000 Mormon boys and young men that were sexually abused by Mormon leaders over the past several decades.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
That's just heartbreaking. And as we'll get into, talking about that this is not just a few bad apples. 100,000 is not a few bad apples when that many children have been harmed, and this is definitely a systemic issue.
No, if over 20,000 Mormon boys and youth have been sexually abused, to me, this reaches the scale of Spotlight. So did you ever see the movie Spotlight?
Yeah.
Catholic Church. It's one of the best movies. We should include this in the show
For
notes.
sure.
One of the best movies you'll ever see is the movie Spotlight that shows something like 7 or 8% of the Catholic priests worldwide were shown to be sexually abusing young kids.
Right.
And they were just reassigning the priest. Whenever the priest would get caught, they would cover it up, pressure the victims to stay quiet, keep it out of the news, buy off victims, and then pressure reassign the priests. Oh, a priest sexually abuses a kid in Uruguay, send him to Panama.
Right.
A Catholic priest sexually abuses a kid in Boston, send him to Chicago.
And there is a similar thing. I'm sure you've seen the files of the Boy Scouts where they have, do you know what it's called? That file of, it's like the predator file. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
There's a file of Boy Scouts, and the church has known that the Boy Scouts will fire somebody from working for them, and the church will still review their case, know why they were fired. There's a CNN entire piece about this I was just watching, and this man who was sexually abusing kids for years was known to be fired for abusing children, and the church still hired him. He was still an active LDS member, and then still participating in a different Boy Scouts troop. So they can have access to information the same way the Catholic Church does, know what this person inclinations are to abuse children, and then still put them in places where they can harm children and do in fact harm children.
Absolutely.
This is a systemic issue at that point. It's that the church knows something and covers it up.
Absolutely.
Whether it's Catholic or Mormon. So it's infuriating, really.
So I've had friends already reach out to me about this story who are willing to come on the podcast. And by the way, I think I want to do a Mormon Stories episode where victims kind of can just share their brief story of abuse with the Boy Scouts. And so we'll just put a call out for that now. If you are Mormon or have been Mormon, if you were sexually abused as a Boy Scout or as a Cub Scout, we want to hear your story, and we'll have you record a short audio or video snippet of your story, and we'll just sew those all together and have that be a Mormon Stories episode. But Andrew Wiscombe already is commenting on Facebook. He says, I personally know 5 people who were abused as Boy Scouts.
Oh my
God. Yeah, maybe please share your comments now, and Carah can monitor them as I'm talking, and we can kind of showcase those a little bit. So over 80,000 victims, probably over 100,000 victims if you count the ones that haven't reported. And the point that I think we were trying to make is that the Mormon Church the church always wants to keep these abuse cases secret and private, because they don't want to cause scandal in the ward, they don't want to cause scandal in the stake, and they don't want to be legally held liable.
Right.
And so you know, how many of you have ever heard the church announce in your ward or your stake or in general conference that sexual abuse happened in a Boy Scout troop? Have you ever heard that?
Nope, it's somebody else's though. It's like a friend of a friend of a friend, maybe. But
yeah, you hear it through the whisper, but the church never historically has wanted to come clean about this. And so that's why it's kept quiet. The victims are hushed up. The perpetrators are just like slapped on the wrist, oftentimes reassigned. Oftentimes they just move to other wards and stakes within the church, and then they become repeat offenders. And so that's why I'm comparing this to the Catholic Spotlight scandal.
It's apropos.
And we'll see the numbers in just a second. So that first number, 20% of all scouts, that's a big deal. Over 100,000 victims is a number that I'm very comfortable saying.
Right.
And, you know, the other thing that's reported is the Boy Scouts of America are in bankruptcy. So they're officially filing Chapter 11. And all of these settlements with insurance companies and class action lawsuits are because the Boy Scouts are currently in bankruptcy. And because we know Mormons were made up a large percentage of the leadership of the Boy Scouts of America, that's on us a little bit.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just the Boy Scouts of America, it's Mormon leaders and Mormon general authorities that have been co-leading the Boy Scouts of America with other leaders and churches for decades.
Yeah.
So let's get to the numbers. So in terms of the actual financial settlement, what did you read, Carah, in terms of the numbers?
So the Mormon Church agreed to a $250 million settlement.
Billion. Oh,
Sorry,
million. No, you're right. I'm
million.
sorry. 250
You are
million. I'm
confusing
sorry.
how much money they have versus how much they
Yeah,
give away,
that's right.
John.
Sorry. 250 million.
You're right. And then there are the insurers, the Hartford Group.
That's
Is that
one
it?
of the
One of the
insurers,
insurers.
the Hartford Group. Yeah.
Of 787 million. And then another insurer, Century how do you pronounce that?
Indemnity.
Indemnity. I don't know what that word means. I'll look it up later. Anyway, which are still in negotiations. But all in all, how much money are we talking about?
Over $1 billion, which seems like a nice round number. And it also seems like a lot, right? I mean, at first glance anyway.
At first glance, I think it seems like a lot, but in comparison to how many people are actually being able to get a settlement from that 100 billion.
Yeah. That's kind of the rub.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just stick with that for a second. How many of you paid tithing to the Mormon Church over the years? The church talks about the widow's mite. The church talks about sacred tithing funds. The Mormon Church just took $250 million worth of tithing from its global membership, not to feed the poor, not to provide water to Africans that don't have clean water, not to provide homeless shelters, right? The Mormon Church is announcing $250 million of your tithing, of our tithing. Did you pay tithing?
Oh, yeah. I paid tithing when I could not afford it. Let me tell you.
Yeah. That money is going not to charitable endeavors, but $250 million is going to pay victims of sexual abuse when the church was leading those scout troops and leading the Boy Scouts of America.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's really painful, especially when I always like to say this. Sorry if you hear me say this a lot, but I believe by the most part that the church members are good people and they put their faith in their leaders' hands, and they're in a system where either they're brought up in it or that's just where they've converted and they find some spiritual strength and solace and peace from the teachings of the Mormon Church. Like a lot of churches teach that, but unfortunately there's a system that has been put in place where the system cares more about protecting the good name of the system than the people that are actually served within it. And so unless people who are served within that system, who are finding their peace and their solace there, speak out and say that I paid tithing to this into this system and I would like to see it actually go to these things and not to be further hiding sexual abuse cases and just going to things that keep the good name of the church alive, but not actually serve the members and serve the children, when you know that you were putting your hands kind of in whoever the bishop appoints sometimes in these different ward callings in different places that we've all grown up in the church to hopefully trust that they're going to do the right thing. And time after time, the church doesn't. And it pains me that there are so many people who they love the church and they want to see what's best, their children grow up and have good morals and values and teach them the gospel as they see it, but they're in a system that doesn't care as much about their children as they do. Or does that make sense?
Or certainly as they think,
as much as they think.
So many Mormon parents just send your kids to the church and they're going to be taken care of. Send your kids on campouts because Mormon priesthood leaders would never abuse your children, and the Mormon Church is going to make sure and protect your children. We're getting some wonderful comments coming in. I'm going to put the mouse here so that we can both browse comments as needed.
Oh, you're doing it with your left hand.
Yeah, I'm being ambidextrous. But James Bowley writes, as a scout leader, I always obeyed the 2 leadership deep principle. That rule immediately stopped when it became a priesthood function, 2 deep activity, and the right to home teaching. So yeah, over the years, the Mormon Church did not do what it needed, according to James Bowley. David writes something really sobering. David Martin writes, 4 boys my age in my ward died by suicide because of what happened to us. So that's just tragic.
So
and again, that's
sorry.
just one ward,
My God.
one of our listeners. Yeah. So go ahead, Carah, if you want to, and kind of browse through some of those comments, and you can highlight any ones that are relevant. But the part of something that's notable here is when you think about $250 million, you might think, well, that's a lot of money. It depends, because if you just assume, let me pull out my calculator. If you just assume that, let's just say that,
It's like if I make $50,000 a year, it's like a $60 ticket that I went to like dinner. That's how much.
yeah,
That's the percentage of it. Is that what you're trying to figure
well,
out?
let's just say that 40,000 boys, young Mormon boys and young men, were sexually abused.
Okay.
So that's double the 20% of the 100,000 that we're estimating. So let's just say 40,000, divide that by 250 million, right? That's, wait, no. That would be, let me do it a different way. 250
You can't do this in your head?
million, right? Divided by, let's just say
Right, let me do it in my head.
50,000 Mormon boys. That's $5,000 per boy.
$5,000 per boy.
Nice work. Yeah. So that's just a back of the envelope thing. If we take that $250 million with the 50,000 boys, at least Mormon boys that were sexually abused, that's $5,000 per boy. Now, let's just say your son was sexually abused by the Mormon Church, when the Mormon Church was clearly the number one national leader within the Boy Scouts, and they offered you and your family $5,000 in terms of therapy, reparation, healing, compensation for neglect, systemic abuse, and cover up. How would you feel about $5,000?
Not good.
Yeah,
Not good at all.
It's not a lot.
And should we mention that it's 250 million from the LDS Church, but also going into a pool that's from their insurers as well. So each victim, it's really up in the air how much they're going to get at this point, because things are still in negotiation, right? So we don't really know. We know how much the church is willing to give, and not willing to give, but you know what I mean? How much the church is required to pay. But in terms of how much will actually come out from all of the class action lawsuits and all of the collective insurers and lawyers, what the actual victims are getting, it's you can have your calculator all you want, but I don't think we'll know that number for a long time, how much they'll actually get in a settlement, right?
Yeah. I mean, if one of our listeners wants to divide $1 billion by 80,000 victims, I think that's a number we should also calculate. So listeners, one of you guys do that right now. Divide $1 billion by 80,000 victims. And that's just the people that have come out so far. Anyway, The other dimension about this is how much money the Mormon Church actually has. And we all know, thanks to David Nielsen, the Ensign Peak whistleblower, and the financial disclosures that the Mormon Church was forced to admit, we now know that the Mormon Church has well over 150, as you called me on, $1 billion just sitting in cash, in stock, and financial reserves right now. And I'm not mispronouncing it like I did earlier. $150 billion in investments, and they own between 2% and 4% of the state of Florida, of the publicly available land, not to mention real estate all around the world. So does the church have enough money?
Yes, I would say
could they afford more than 250 million?
Yeah, but the more money that comes out on that headline, because they know that it's going to go in a headline, it's going to get spread around the world, that it's just going to make it look like more victims. They want to keep that number as small as humanly possible.
Yeah,
regardless.
We have a couple listeners that we're grateful that went ahead and did the math for us. Let's give shout outs to them. They calculated. So basically $1 billion divided by 80,000 victims is what, Carah?
12,500
per victim. And that's not counting future victims. So thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, TK. Thanks, Akeem. All those who did that math. We have lots of people. Don't we have good listeners and viewers? Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for helping out with that. Okay. So actually we have, let me just, if you'll scroll down over here just for a second, we actually have some, just some quotes about the reactions to the settlement, because it kind of doesn't matter what Carah and I think. It matters kind of what the victims think. And so in one of the articles, it reads, representatives of the official victims committee described the proposed settlements as, what's the quote?
Grossly unfair.
Grossly unfair. That's from the Associated Press. Quote, the only winners in this latest proposal are the Boy Scouts, their local councils, the Mormon Church, and the Hartford Insurance Company, says Michael Pfau, an attorney whose firm represents more than 1,000 abuse claimants in the bankruptcy. he said in a prepared statement. He goes on to write, the Boy Scouts are offering abuse survivors a fraction of what their cases are worth and the assets available to pay them, Thau added. The Mormon Church is reported to have, as we just said, roughly over, I'm going to say $150 billion in assets, but is offering to pay a paltry, so that's what the attorneys feel, paltry $250 million to compensate, he said, the thousands, I'm going to say tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of abuse survivors who were abused in Mormon Boy Scout troops by Mormon Boy Scout leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Paltry. Like, there are probably listeners who have feelings about lawyers that are like always trying to gouge corporations and, whether these class action lawsuits are fair or not. What would you have thoughts about that?
Oh, about what lawyers are doing? Yeah, I mean, that is a bad faith interpretation, as bad as it gets. And of course, it's difficult without a trial for every single person to go through the details and drum up all of this history. So just to have a straight up like class action lawsuit across the board, a settlement for these people, I think is the most, moral and civil and just like best way to accomplish the most good for the most people. And if lawyers who went to school and passed the bar happen to also be able to pay their mortgage because they represent victims, I'm so sorry, but that's what lawyers need to do. They need to get these people justice.
Yeah. And it's, what we ought to do, let's just invite, if there are any attorneys who are part of this case, if any of you know any of the attorneys that are part of this case, we would love to have you on Mormon Stories and interview some of the attorneys. I was just going to say, this is the way the justice system is set up in the United States right now. We all probably hate the litigiousness of modern society, but how else are corporations, and the Mormon Church is a corporation, how else are corporations help the justice but through class action lawsuits?
I can't think of it's not perfect, but would somebody like to suggest a better way?
Yeah. And why shouldn't, if attorneys are going to do the work, and oftentimes these attorneys do the work at their own cost, and the only way they receive compensation is if they actually win.
Right.
So contingency fees and class action lawsuits are the way American justice happens. So even if you don't like that, this is the way America runs right now. And how else, literally, what else will the Mormon Church listen to? They won't listen to victims. They won't listen to victims' families. They don't even care about the media. But if people are suing the Mormon Church, bad PR lawsuits, that's really the only way to get the church to pay attention.
Right. And I think just along the lines of systemic abuse problems, when the numbers add up this much, I think we should always err on the side of believing victims and trying to get them the settlements that they deserve for a lifetime that was taken from them, either them or, just the treatment that they're going to have to go through the rest of their lives. So it's a really bad faith interpretation to look at this as like a money grab, that I think when people prioritize the good name of the church over believing victims, then we have a screwed up system. Yeah.
Really quick shout out to Mark Fuentes. We've had a few of you donate to this program through Super Chat.
Thanks, Mark.
My compensation at the Open Stories Foundation is fixed. We're good. But we are paying Carah and other Gerardo to help with thumbnails and cinematography, Brooklyn to do our editing, Carah to be co-host. We really appreciate, we live by your donations and your support. And so if you appreciate Carah, if you appreciate this programming, if you want to see us cover other news topics, we appreciate that support. So thanks to everyone who donates through Super Chat or through the Facebook feature of stars as well. So anyway, they're calling it paltry. And so, we want to just use this time again to say, if you've been abused as a Boy Scout within the Mormon Church and you want to tell your story, we want to find a way to help you tell your story on Mormon Stories. Even if it's just recording a few-minute video clip that we can seam together. If you know any of the attorneys, also, we would love to include them. Now, let's just talk really quickly about the church's apology. So we did read that the church, and again, I think it's our buddy, is it Hawkins? What's his name? Michael Hawkins? Eric Hawkins.
Eric Hawkins.
So our buddy Eric Hawkins did release an apology, and I think we should read it.
On behalf of Jesus Christ. Oh no, the Church of Jesus Christ. Okay, go on.
Yeah, and and by the way, it's worth noting that Dallin H. Oaks is on record as saying that the Mormon Church will neither seek nor ever give an apology. So the Mormon Church, it's obviously acknowledging guilt by being willing to pay $250 million, but it is not willing to issue any apology to the victims. Thoughts on that?
No, I only have jokes, and this is too serious.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really serious. And so I want to just take a second to find, do you know where the apologies are?
It was actually where I already had it.
Okay, sorry.
You were scrolling up and down like a madman, looking there. It's right there. Apology.
Okay, so here it is.
You want me to read it?
You want to read it? This is the apology, non-apology from the Mormon Church.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints condemns abuse of any kind. We express our love and concern for those who have experienced abuse through scouting and any other circumstances. Hey, abuse happens. If that happened to you, sorry about that that was a thing you encountered.
No, it's kind of like the mistakes were made, but not by me.
Yeah.
Right?
Mistakes were made, but not by me.
Yeah, it's condemning abuse, which is wow. Who doesn't condemn abuse, right? And then it's basically saying we express our love and concern for those who have been abused. But what's it missing in your view?
Any kind of just acknowledgement that we done blanked up, we done put people in positions where we did not have the spirit of discernment, and some incredibly beautiful children were abused under our watchful / not watchful care.
Yeah, like what would be, what if you could help Eric Hawkins with an apology? What realistic things does the Mormon Church have to apologize for? I mean, we've kind of started touching on them. What would you list?
Oh, first of all, for not having proper screening in place and not paying attention to
background checks,
not paying attention to any kind of history in the person's past, that kind of they sweep that under the rug, like we're saying, move them to a different place.
So not adequately tracking the abusers.
Yeah.
Right.
Not having a two-person, what is it called?
Too deep leadership. All the years they didn't have too deep leadership.
Right. And I think in any instance where adult men are alone with children it's really highly suspect. And I'm sure there's plenty of other systems that can be put in place.
And to this day, the Mormon Church still has one-on-one interviews with bishops and 12-year-old girls, asking them if they masturbate, asking them if they touch themselves. One-on-one interviews with 16-year-old girls, asking them, when you made out with that boy, where did he touch you? Under the clothes, over the clothes, did you orgasm?
Yeah, it just shows their priorities are completely skewed from what I think a normal moral person's priorities are, which is to protect the mental health and physical safety of children. But if they need to dig and get those answers, because we need to know if you've done these things, we need to keep you in the shame cycle, or we need to keep you in this system where if you happen to be abused, we're technically not going to do anything about it. Like they don't have the best interest of the people as their highest priority. And that comes out time and time and time again. That's why I think you and I do this job, is it's so frustrating that no matter how many times we talk about it and report on it, so many things don't change into the church until we're trying to push them, trying to move that needle, right?
Yeah.
There's so many small areas where they could change and not set up Mormon children and youth and women and all kinds of people for this abuse, but it just shows time and time again that's not their highest value and priority.
Yeah.
Even though I know there's good people in the church,
of course,
who in their mind that's a high priority, but the way the system works, it doesn't come to fruition.
Yeah. If I had to list the things I would want the church to apologize for, it's for number one, lacking the spirit of discernment that this was going to happen in the first place. Because we are taught that they're prophets, seers, and revelators, so they should have foreseen this. If there was anything the church could receive inspiration about, it's not a logo design change. It's the fact that over 100,000 of their own boys and youth were going to be sexually abused in the Boy Scout program. So to never partner with the church, with the Boy Scouts of America to begin with. But from there, it's covering up the abuse. It's not punishing the abusers. It's reassigning them and not tracking them adequately so that they could continue and repeat abuse in ward and stake after ward and stake. It's all the many times they silenced the victims, pressured the victims not to speak, pressured the victims of the families not to speak, did hush-hush one-on-one quiet settlements. And then the fact that the Mormon Church made up 20+% of the leadership. So the Mormon Church it wasn't just the Boy Scout, again, just the Boy Scout troop leaders that were Mormon. It's all the leaders that the Mormon Church funneled into corporate headquarters for the Boy Scouts of America that were part of the systemic abuse that was covered up for decades and decades. So
if you get one thing from whatever this is going to take an hour to do, you get one thing. It's what John just said. It is the systemic abuse that the church has funneled and covered up. Like, that is undeniable. And if you care about Mormons like I do, that needs to change, whether it's part of the Boy Scout program or any other program the church does. It is a systemic abuse problem.
Yeah.
Continue.
And a final thing that I would love to see the church apologize for is for never apologizing. Like, if we know at minimum 20,000 Mormon boys and youth have been sexually abused within the Mormon Church, that's a lot. Is that a lot? Like, that's crazy. But the church has never once publicly apologized to those victims, nor even in a general conference said, hey, we've got a sexual abuse problem in the church. In Boy Scouts, we need to fix it. We've never, all the, Carah, think about this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
How many times have we heard in general conference that the gays, that same-sex marriage is a threat to the family, and that we need to fight same-sex marriage, and that we need to be opposed to non-traditional marriage? Just give me an estimate. How many times have we heard that in church magazines, in conference talks, in BYU talks?
It's always a part of the rotation.
I mean,
topics, so it's there. It's
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of public pronouncements saying that gays are going to destroy society, that the family's under attack. Carah, how many times have we heard the Mormon Church ever say in general conference, in ensign articles, in public news statements, that there's a rampant problem with sexual abuse of Boy Scouts within the church, and we need to stop this rampant sexual abuse of boys and young men from happening? How many times have you heard that conference talk?
Let me get out my calculator and add 0 plus 0.
Ensign articles.
0.
Yeah. And I mean, we're being a little bit flippant about it, but this is like super heavy. Because
it's so frustrating. It causes so much damage. It is literally one of the number one causes of what would you call it? Like suicidal ideation. We've had people in the comments already talking about that they've been abused and that they know people who have ended their lives because of this type of abuse. This is causing people's lives to crumble and end. And this is not just like drumming up bad press for the LDS Church. It's because the LDS Church has created its own bad infrastructure to not take care of these problems that need to be addressed before another single child in its care gets harmed. It's an out of control issue, and to say anything less than that is to do a huge disservice.
Yeah. Sam, one of our listeners on YouTube, writes, in my experience, it wasn't until I became a scout leader myself that they finally started instituting background checks to screen adult leaders. This should have been the case from the very beginning. Again, Mormon church leaders trust their leaders. What is a prophet good for? A prophet seer, to see ahead, a revelator? What are these leaders good for? Why is it that the church was on the tail end of too deep leadership and making the environment safe for these boys and youth versus being on the front end? What good is it to have a prophet, seer, and revelator? And I'm just going to also just close this point where we're trying to make, and you can look for any other comments or questions that viewers have. But what is a church of, we all were taught by the Mormon Church the steps for repentance. It's
admit fault.
Yeah, go ahead.
Admit fault. Admit that you did something wrong.
Seek restitution. Make it right.
Make it right, and just repeat everything else that John said.
And apologize.
I can't remember. Yeah.
Isn't apologize?
Yeah.
I mean, was that not part of what you were taught? Is it part of repentance?
Yeah.
Confess and forsake the sin, and then make it right, and then never do it again. The church did not confess this sin. They have not forsaken it, and they did not make it right when they had many, many ample opportunities to do it. And now they think, $250 million is going to be viewed by members as like, whoa, the church really did its part. That's like 6 minutes of compound interest on $150 billion. Like, that's a sneeze. $250 million, believe it or not, is like a burp.
Yeah.
In terms of the church's overall
like
wealth.
a 1 minute day in their like compound interest. You're right.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and speaking of when they were doing their kind of little apology, I highlighted it on the screen, but I didn't get to read it, that I think Eric Hawkins said that this is a contribution to the victim, somebody mentioned. I don't know if you read that in the articles or not, John.
And I'm sure what do you think about that?
That like really makes it look like it's like a donation, like they're doing this out of the goodness of their hearts, that they weren't like taken to court and like actually had to be forced to pay this. Like its contribution seems like kind of soft language.
It's kind of legalese because the church doesn't want to admit responsibility. So it's not compensation. It's just a donation. It's a contribution. Like, I'm sure that's where that word came from. And by the way, the rampant sexual abuse within Mormonism far exceeds just what's happened in the Boy Scouts. And Michael Benjamin on YouTube writes, John DeLynn, I would love to share a local case here in Casson, Minnesota, where the LDS Church is actively involved in defending a registered sex offender from Utah who was Elders Quorum president and abused a young man again.
Wow.
We know about the case, the cover-up case in West Virginia. The Mormon Church has a super long history of, again, protecting abusers at the expense of victims all throughout the world, paying hush money to silence them. And this is a much, much bigger problem than just the Boy Scouts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Carah, one of the things that we did in preparation is you spent some time actually reading responses from faithful members. So I think we should close today with kind of reading a few of those.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do that?
All right. So I went and scoured the web looking for what are the Mormons saying is the name of this segment. So I try to get inside their head. I'm trying to think, when you see an article like this and you read about what the Church of Settlement is, what is the response? And so I think I have 3 of them. I'm going to role play as the active Mormon. I have 4 of them actually. And John, you're going to give your best response. Okay.
Okay.
So, hey, the church is getting sued by a bunch of opportunists. And the next time somebody questions why the church hoards $100 billion, it's for times like this. Yeah, because they need all of the money and they need people to pay tithing for when they have to do these settlements.
Okay, believing Mormon Carah. So prophets, seers, and revelators didn't use their prophecyship and seership and revelating powers to prevent the sexual abuse of children. They just skipped right forward to using their prophet, seer, and revelator powers to amass hundreds of billions of dollars in wealth to, after the fact, pay off a small percentage of the victims with small pieces of money. And that's actually a feature, not a bug, because this shows just how the prophets, seers, and revelators were inspired of God.
Exactly. They are inspired by God. Good.
So God cares more about stockpiling
money
money to pay victims than he does to actually prevent the abuse itself from happening. Is that kind of what this person's arguing?
Yeah. Flawless logic. I can't even. Number 2. This
is Faithful Mormon.
This is Faithful Mormon Carah saying, the Boy Scouts and the church are separate entities. So the abuse happened with the Boy Scouts.
Oh.
Why are you talking about the church?
Yeah. So again, I would love an investigative reporter to go back and look at I am sure that Mormons sat, and in fact, I am certain that Mormons have always sat on the board of directors of the National Council of the Boy Scouts of Association. So I guarantee you look at past BSA boards, there's always like high-level Mormons serving on the boards. And then if you look at executive leadership within the Boy Scouts of America, you will find Mormons overrepresented there. And again, we represented 20% of the Boy Scouts of America. We were the single largest participant in the United States for the Boy Scouts of America.
But
so
if abuse,
we were the Boy Scouts of America.
But if the abuse happens, they're wearing their Boy Scouts gear. They're on Boy Scouts campouts. They're not in an LDS church building. It's under the Boy Scouts umbrella. It's their brand. It's not our church.
So again, that's like saying it's a Catholic priest's fault if he abuses a kid. What that fails to take into consideration is the decades of systemic abuse institutionally, where both the Catholic Church in the Spotlight case and the Mormon Church in the Boy Scouts of America case, they knew about the abuses. They did not protect the victims. They covered up the abuses. They let offenders re-abuse. They didn't punish the perpetrators, and they silenced the victims with hush money or with pressure. So there is a systemic problem at the highest levels of the leadership of the Boy Scouts of America, and within the highest levels of the leadership of the Mormon Church, and within Curtin McConkie. We all know that the Mormon Church, when they set up an abuse hotline, it didn't go to, a hotline for sexual abuse victims for mental health support services. Where directly did the Mormon Church's hotline for abuse victims given to bishops, Carah, where did that hotline actually ring into?
Oh, it actually is the same place I got my nose from. It's a joke I have. I got my nose from Curtin McConkie. That's why it's so crooked.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of making jokes, and it's so that we don't cry. And that's exactly right. The Mormon Church for decades gave a 1-800 number hotline to bishops, so that when an abuse victim came out, the bishop calls Curtin McConkie to protect the church, not to provide aid and support to the victims.
And as a mother, you're a father, but if there's a Mormon listening to this, I just want you to think about an organization, no matter how much spiritual edification you get from them, you are putting your children in a scenario where they link their phone to their lawyer's offices, that is the higher priority when push comes to shove than protecting your very children, that you are putting them in a system where that is just almost like common knowledge now, that that's what they care about. That's what their priority is. So that's what's difficult for me, is how much I love Mormons and how much I do care about people wanting to make change within the system. While at the same time, if I'm a mom, I can't in good conscience take my kids into an LDS church building and hand them over to their Sunday school teachers, or let them go on camping trips or something when they're teenagers, because I don't know that the church actually has my children's best interests at heart. I don't know that for sure, and I'm not going to take that risk. So that's my main point that I want to get across. Should I read one more?
Yeah. Really quickly. Van Medeiros writes, if you want to interview me, I was abused by the Boy Scouts of America and the LDS Church for 6 years, and I have shovels full of dirt. So yes, if any of you were victims, want to share your story, we won't be able to share everyone's story, but we will be able to create little video snippets of people's stories and then sew them together. Please email us at mormonstories@gmail.com. And we would love to have you as part of the program. Carah, let's go to Faithful Mormon quote number 4.
Okay, so what you're missing here, John DeLynn, is that the Boy Scouts of America and the LDS Church have excellent teachings, and they help people do lots of great things. And yeah, some bad events have happened, but there are evil, conniving people who work their way into, this organization. Yeah, there's an ugly side, but there's a really good upside, and it's not worth smearing the church and smearing the Boy Scouts of America just because some bad people took advantage of some children. What you're not realizing is there's a lot of good that's being done, and good on the church for paying this settlement.
So this is basically the few, one bad apple argument. You're basically saying that one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch, that just because a few victims have been abused, the overwhelming good of the Boy Scouts of America swamps any measly, selfish kind of victims that have come out. Is that what you're saying, basically?
Yeah. And there's so much good to be done. Hey, there's bad apples in every organization. Why is this any different? The church is actually doing the right thing.
Yeah. So again, this is decades of abuse. These are prophets, seers, and revelators that we expect to see ahead and protect us. They have been protecting perpetrators for decades. They've been silencing victims. This is systemic, and it's not just a few dozen people. We're talking about probably anywhere between 20 and 100,000 Mormon boys and youth over the past several decades, over the past century. I didn't even mention this. My father was sexually abused during his time as a Mormon Boy Scout when he was growing up.
Oh my God. What year about?
This would have been in the 50s.
Wow.
Yeah.
As a Mormon Boy Scout.
As a Mormon Boy Scout in Salt Lake City. So this goes back into the 40s and 50s. It's not just a few bad apples. When we start talking about tens of thousands over multiple decades, and that the church has known about these things and hasn't fixed the problem, didn't come clean about it, didn't notify the membership broadly, didn't do a zero tolerance policy for it, and frankly, for decades, didn't punish the thousands and thousands of perpetrators, but instead just protected them, silenced the issues, and let them reoffend in other wards and stakes. This is systemic. It's just like the Catholic spotlight, I think.
All right, and last one is, we kind of touched on this, so you can make this one brief, but I've heard some people in the comment sections on KSL and other places saying that this settlement is not about justice for the abused, presumably the offending scout leaders that have been charged and will serve time in prison. This lawsuit is about getting money from the deepest pockets that these victims can find.
I mean, again, people do that. People pick a lawsuit or a class action lawsuit. They pick the wealthiest organization they can find and sue it.
Yeah.
But that's, I can't see that that's what's going on here. What's going on here is, why would the church give $250 million? It's because the church knows it's guilty. And by the way, this didn't say Carah Burrell, faithful Carah Burrell. This didn't say the Catholic Church gives $250 million and the Presbyterian Church and the Methodist Church gives $200 million. And, the Orthodox Jews give, $100 million. There's only one church that is a part of this major announcement. It's our church. And there's a reason why that is. It's because we became synonymous. We took over the Boy Scouts, in effect, and we became synonymous with them for decades. And that's why the church is announcing, the only church in affiliation with this settlement, and such a massive amount, $250 million, which is paltry when given the large number of victims, but it's still a massive acknowledgement. People are going to say the Mormon Church didn't admit guilt here. I think $250 million is a pretty big admission of guilt.
Right.
Yeah. So, faithful member, this is not just money grubbers trying to take advantage of a rich organization. This is the church acting egregiously irresponsible for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right. So what else, Carah, for today? Did we cover it? Is there more? Are there any comments?
The only last comment is, I will give credit where credit's due, that I think that the Boy Scouts, before that they declared bankruptcy, I think that they were moving in good directions with trying more inclusivity. I think they were doing a lot more screenings in the last few years and background checks, while the Mormon Church was, they were going on separate paths in the last few years since 2018. And the Mormon Church has not even made the same strides that the Boy Scouts have made in terms of trying to protect children, trying to do background checks and screening. And that is it's a really sad loss that the Boy Scouts, that even with all of the things that we just mentioned throughout the troops that were associated with the Mormon Church and otherwise, that they were making strides in the right direction, while the Mormon Church has still not made hardly any strong implements and changes. So I feel like it's so much more could be done. And I hope that us talking about it and your comments and everybody's concerns and getting maybe another couple interviews talking about people who maybe have been abused in the scouting program will move the needle a little bit, and that the Mormon Church will hopefully realize that some better changes need to be made, so these types of egregious abuse of children never happens again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe when we do these episodes where we kind of hit the church pretty hard for its mistakes, we can always end with a bit of a constructive bit where we sort of say what we think the church should do. Gerardo makes the comment that Oaks is on record as saying that the church only gives out about $44 million a year in welfare. I think that's a great point, Gerardo. Let me just say what I would like to see the church do, and then you can add that. I would like to see the Mormon Church, number one, apologize, to follow Jesus's example and follow its own example of what it teaches us repentance is. I would like to see the church apologize to its victims and to the family members of the victims and to the people who died, and to all the people whose lives were wrecked by these pedophiles. I would like to see the church pay more money than the $250 million that's already out there. I would like to see the church go on General Conference and in an Ensign article, put the whole church membership on notice that it is sorry for what it's done and that it takes responsibility for what it's done. And then I would like to see the church kind of move forward in positive ways, where not just for youth programs, but for adults as well, the church implements background checks on leaders, zero tolerance policies for abuse. Talks. How about this, Carah? How about the Mormon Church mentions the pedophilia and sexual abuse more than it mentions its war on LGBTQ members and same-sex marriage? Is that a reasonable?
Yeah. I'm on board with that. That every single time they're ready to like say that the gays are coming for our kids, we'll say, hey, we have some work we need to get done.
How about we clean our own
here?
house?
Yeah, let's clean our own house. Let's talk about consent and purity culture and breaking down a lot of the things that set people up for abuse in general and people to become abusers. So there's so many good topics that could cover within the church, and the war on the families is a kind of a giant distraction in my opinion.
There's a great comment from Bizarro Ward. He writes, youth leaders should be mandatory reporters. And I'm actually up that. So
that's really good. Yeah.
So in Utah, because Utah state legislature is controlled by Mormons, like 80% Mormons in the state legislature, they've made it in Utah law that bishops and church leaders are not mandatory reporters. So if a 12-year-old kid goes, or a 9-year-old kid goes to a bishop and says, I was sexually abused, if I'm a psychologist, I have to report that to Child Protective Services. A Mormon bishop is not a mandatory reporter in Utah, and they don't have to report. What if the Mormon Church and its 80% of the Utah legislature were to change the Utah law so that every Mormon bishop was a mandatory reporter for sexual abuse?
My mind is blown that that's not already a thing. Like that pains me, right?
Yeah.
That really pains me that people confide in their leaders and their bishops and they're not already needing to report those things.
Yeah.
Kurt McConkey's on the line though.
Yeah. All right. Well, Carah, I really appreciate that you could receive a text from me at whatever AM this morning saying, let's do this episode, and that you would just come in and make this happen.
Yeah. I care about a lot of things to do with Mormonism. And the number one thing that's always on my heart is making the people within the church have a better experience because they have informed consent, because they know that their children are going to be cared for well. And I can't do that unless we talk about these really hard issues. And I hope that I also brought a little bit of levity and like a little bit of lightheartedness, because this is such a tough topic. I hope I wasn't being disrespectful, but trust me, this is really where my heart is trying to get people who have been in whether it's the Mormon Church, Catholic Church, any system that is trying to serve people, but also benefits when the people who are abused within the system stay silent, making sure the victims are heard, making sure that these settlements are being paid and that preventative measures are being put into place so nobody even needs a settlement ever again, because the system is a healthy place to raise children in.
I love it. So fist bump.
Bam.
And yeah, Carah, I think we should just a couple final notes. We want to cover these sort of topics more. We want to cover current events, maybe even weekly on Mormon Stories podcast. And we want to know, do you like this feedback? Do you like this format? Can we get your feedback? Would you guys like a panel where we bring on people like John Larson, Natasha Helfer, Zelf, Zelf on the Shelf?
Do you want me to bring on my marshmallow gun? Do you want to see it? Do you want me to pull it out from my grandma's attic?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. But we want your feedback. So if you like this program, please let us know in your comments or email us if you like kind of Mormon news coverage. If you have suggestions on how we can make it better.
James wants me to keep up with the Kurt McConkey knows content.
Okay.
You got it.
Lots of jokes and levity from James. If you, so where was I?
Do you want to see more of this content? Are you liking it? What else can we do? Because we want to bring as many things that are in the news that relate to Mormonism and making change. What can we do in a panel format, a weekly, daily? What kind of content are you looking for? Please email us at mormonstories.org or leave a comment in this YouTube video
or on Facebook
box or on Facebook.
Yeah. And also we really do rely on your financial support. So if you're ever able to donate, click the little $sign in YouTube and donate to this program. That helps us support Carah and the great work she does, and Gerardo and Brooklyn and others. You can always go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor. That's the preferred way so that we can know each month what our expenses can be. We're a nonprofit. It's all tax deductible in the US, and we're transparent in our finances. So please support us in all the ways you can, especially through feedback. And then again, I just want to end the way we began. We have an amazing event coming up. If you go to Thrive Beyond Religion, go to events in the events calendar. I just want to plug again, Thrive Day 2021, November 14th, 10 a.m. We are going to have Sarah Edmondson from A Little Bit Culty podcast. She was in The Vow, the HBO series The Vow, about the NXIVM cult. Her and her husband are going to be coming to Thrive Day 2021. Also,
in
Lance
the Salt Palace.
In the Salt Palace. Lance Allred, former NBA basketball player, played with LeBron James for the Cleveland Cavaliers. 4 million view TED Talk on what is your polygamy. First legally deaf NBA basketball player. Lance Allred's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Carah, you're going to be there?
I fear I may have girl bossed too close to the sun because I have agreed to find, I think, 10 TikTok stars and put them in some type of like comedy TikTok panel, something fun. We're going to do something great at Thrive Day. I just heard about it 5 minutes before we went to air, but I'm already excited to get to work. So let's wrap this up.
Yes. So if you have a book that you sell, a podcast, a YouTube channel, a TikToker, we want to help you at Thrive Day 2021 connect with your audience. So all you have to do right now, go to thrivebeyondreligion.com, events, find Thrive Day 2021. It's only $25 per person to register. You can register right now. And most importantly, Thrive Day is nonprofit. None of us are profiting off of this event. We're paying our speakers. Other than that, it's probably going to operate at a loss because the Salt Palace is super expensive to book. But we're doing it because we want to support healing and growth. Oh, I forgot to mention, Jesse Funk is doing a youth track called Especially for Truth during Thrive Day. So parallel to the adults being in one room, Jesse Funk is going to have youth in a different room, having cool content, healing and growth for post-Mormon teens and youth. And so youth are welcome to Thrive Day as well. And Jesse Funk is amazing, and she's a part of that.
I am so happy that Jesse's doing that. Trust me, whatever Jesse Funk does, you're going to want to follow her to the ends of the earth. She makes some great events. I've already spoken it to, John's spoken it to. So far, she's already launched this, Especially for Truth events, and they're amazing, amazing. So she's going to be doing a youth portion during the Thrive event. So if you go to the Thrive website, and if you have kids between the ages of, we're thinking we're like 12 and 18 or 19 is probably the limit, that they can go and they can attend Thrive Day along with you as an adult. So that was an amazing idea. I'm so glad that Jesse's going to do that.
Yeah. So Thrive Day 2021, November 14th, 10 a.m., $25 a person. Go to Thrive Beyond Religion. And we have a fun comment. So Bert says, Carah and John, please feel to be a bit flippant. Getting over some of the hardest moments in my life was only possible because I didn't take it too seriously.
Same.
You're the professional, semi-professional
And guess
comedian,
what we're going
right?
to be doing this afternoon? Do you want to announce what we're doing? With Natasha.
Yeah. So check back at 2:00. That's actually in just 30 minutes. We're going to have Natasha Helfer on Mormon Stories talking about
refresh your browser
healing from
500 times until it hits, because you're not going to want to miss a second of this.
So if you are racked over guilt and torment from sexual shame within Mormonism, Natasha's going to help you find healing and growth.
I'm so excited.
That's part of the gift of the Mormon faith crisis.
I'm going to deconstruct sexual shame with you guys on camera, live. This will be intense. But yeah, it helps that I don't take anything too seriously except for this.
All right. Carah Burrell, thanks for joining us. You're awesome. Thanks to everyone that makes this possible. Thanks to our viewers. Please spread the word. And again, if you were abused as a Boy Scout within the Mormon Church, or if you know about instances in your ward or stake and you want to share a brief video, we would love to put a compilation together to tell your stories, maybe even interview on Mormon Stories. And if you know any of the attorneys who are involved in these class action lawsuits, we would love to interview one or two of them as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
we love you guys. Stay tuned soon for another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. Take care.
And I just wanted to add, make sure that you're going to tune into Natasha's, and we'll be answering live comments because it's going to be a live broadcast
in the live stream as well
in 30 minutes.
See you guys soon.